Had a great summer of book reviews during the last few weeks. Bob Me on Liston, Thomas Hauser's new novel, Aidy McKindy on Dick Tiger. Now to end the run, it's Ron Lyle. Well, it's actually Candace Toft who has written the Ron Lyle's book. It's, to be honest with you, it's called Off the Ropes, the Ron Lyle story, published by Scratching Shed. They usually do rugby league books, but they've done a great job with this. And it's priced about 15 quid on Amazon. There's no such thing as a definite price on Amazon. Now, Candace lives in America, but I called her up to talk Ron Lyle and life. I started by asking Candace how the book has been received in America.
You know, it's coming along. Ron's done a few radio interviews in Denver, and we've had a few reviews, and it's coming. A little slower than it was in Britain, but it's moving along.
Yeah, we sort of tend to move things sort of quick here. Plus, boxing books here, they sell well. They sell well quickly, or they're popular quickly. It's the test in Britain is to see if a book lasts for a couple of months and carries on selling. It's certainly a story worth telling. How did you get involved? I mean, how did you meet Ron, and how did you come around? How did you get around to writing this book?
It goes back more than 30 years. I lived in Denver in the 70s, and Ron was such an iconic figure there. He was a local folk hero, really. He did so much during his professional career for kids. Mm-hmm. And so I thought about him for a long time and moved away and been along, wrote 3 novels, and I really viewed boxing as a brutal sport. I didn't care about boxing, but I was interested in him and his dedication. And then I just thought, I called him, and he said, yeah, let's do it. So then I watched hundreds of hours,
of his
fights and other fights. And I read some books on boxing, and I believe that it's the most honorable of sports. And part of that, of course, is my admiration for Ron, but I'm just astonished at what these guys accomplish in the ring.
Yeah, and what's even more astonishing sometimes is that how they can keep going when they don't accomplish things in the ring. It's that kind of faith that just comes.
And it wasn't easy for him.
No.
He stumbled.
Well, Ron's life wasn't easy, was it? I mean, it was born into a big family and then went off the rails spectacularly as a young man.
Yes, he did. That's a good way of putting it. Yeah, and so, the book became one of redemption, I think. I hadn't set out for it to be that way, but as I got more and more into the story and interviewed every one of his family members and all of his friends, and I got much of the book through them, I realized that he'd gone through a lot and came out of it on top. And I wish you could see him with those kids in the ring now. Well,
listen, I've seen some pictures, and I have said that the next time I go to Vegas for a fight, which sounds very grand, but I do go out there for quite a lot for a fight, so I want to try and end up getting up to Denver and just seeing if I can do something, because I think the British public would like it, because obviously the big fights, which we'll talk about in a minute, including the one with Joe Bugner. But was there?
Great.
Yeah, was
you said the Fixer in Vegas, didn't you?
Yes, Fixer set in Vegas. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm gonna. Hopefully, I'll be okay in Vegas. Maybe not in the MGM, because if there's anyone there that's read it, I may be in trouble. But for the rest of Vegas, I think I'm okay, Candace.
I think so too.
Yeah, listen, I hope so. Was it difficult getting information out of Ron about some of the darker sides and parts of his life?
Very difficult.
Yeah, I heard that.
And we spent a lot. My husband was with me for most of the interviews, not all of them, but some of them. And he would come very, very, very close to telling us everything that happened, in that first shooting.
Yeah.
But then he'd back off. And I have a sense of what really happened. I didn't put it in the book, but I really think he was covering for a friend.
Oh, okay, that's interesting. And then once he comes out of prison, where he's a sort of star, and he seems like a bit of a folk hero I know you mentioned him being a folk hero in his pro career. He seems like he became a bit of a folk hero during his prison stay as well. Once he comes out,
yes,
at whatever age, I mean, it's quite advanced, he decides to become a prize fighter, a boxer.
Yeah. And he talks about the dream, and I believe him that it was a dream, not a esoteric dream, but a dream that he had in his sleep, that he would be fighting for the heavyweight championship, and I believe that he really did, and that's why he never looked back. He just kept going straight. Because he didn't start his professional boxing career until he was almost 30.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
Which is unheard of, yeah.
But in some ways it was a young 30, and in other ways it was a very old and wise 30, wasn't it, really?
Now that's, yeah, you're right.
One way to look at it.
It's very, yeah, that's very true. He was very young because of all the working out he did in prison.
Absolutely. But then he has quite a lot of fights quite quickly, doesn't he? I mean, he rattles through 1971 with about 10 fights or 11 fights. Then the same in 1972 until we come to not necessarily the first test, but the first big test. He took care of Buster Mathis, who of course had fought Joe Frazier for a version of the world title, and beat some perfectly acceptable guys along the way. Including Jack O'Halloran, who later on went on to have famous Jaws in the Bond movies. Then he comes up against Jerry Quarry, who is one of the most underestimated heavyweights, black or white, from the last 30 years. And that's his first loss, if I'm not mistaken, in 1973.
Yes, and that was quite a fight, too.
Yeah, I bet it was. It seems to me...
Every time I'd watch those fights on tape, I'd think, oh, I wonder if it's going to end differently this time. And that was one of them. I kept hoping he'd win.
It never does, and sadly it didn't end differently for Quarry later on in life. He then rattles on after that, taking care of Bonavina, Jimmy Ellis, Boone Kirkman, Memphis Al Jones, and then when he's got a world title fight within clutching distance, he drops a decision to Jimmy Young, who no one in their right mind wants to fight because he's just too clever and awkward, and he makes a good fighter look bad.
I know, and I just couldn't believe that happened. And I don't think he could either, but... You know, Steve, he just, as I said, he always stayed focused. He always looked forward. He didn't look back at that fight.
Yeah.
And I think that's what kept him going.
And then we get to Vegas. It's May 1975. It's Ron Lyle, who about 5 or 6 years earlier was in prison, 28 years of age, seemingly with not a lot of future. And here he is looking over at Muhammad Ali in a Las Vegas ring. What odds on that dream coming true, Candace?
You know, I think part of it has to do with back when he was on that 60 Minutes program, and he had an opportunity to meet Ali and train with Ali, and he still had enormous respect for him. And I think he entered the ring with that respect intact.
Yeah, that's good.
But he also had a lot of confidence.
Yeah. Yeah, that comes across in the book. He wasn't there to make up the numbers, was he?
No.
And then he manages to beat Ernie Shavers, which is again another savage. You know, Lyle's knocked down in the second, Shavers down in the 6th round. What a staggering fight! Yeah. And then we move back to Las Vegas, which the fight that he's often not remembered for, but the fight that he should be remembered for, even though he lost it. The fight against George Foreman, which some people still consider one of the greatest, if not it's in the top 5 of anybody's heavyweight title fights. What does Ron say when he talks about that George Foreman night in Vegas?
He said no. He's told me this, and I don't think I put it in the book, but he has said no two fighters ever wanted to win more than both of them did.
Yeah, that's a good line.
He said, I wanted to win worse than anything, but he said so did he, unfortunately. And have you watched that one?
Yeah, several times.
That's an astonishing fight. I mean, I just couldn't believe it when I watched that fight. And it was almost mesmerizing, isn't it?
Oh, it is mesmerising. There's something about the quality of the film and the closeness of the crowd, and you can feel and sense the punches. It's a YouTube classic, for want of a better word. It should be compulsory viewing for anyone that knows anyone that wants to try and understand boxing. Watch these two guys, because as you said, no two fighters ever wanted to win a fight more than George Foreman and me, and that absolutely sums it up.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then, of course, sometime towards the end of his career, there was another incident where things went very bad.
Yeah, that one I know that we got every word of what really happened from Ron, directly from Ron, and also spoke at length with his attorney at that time. Mm-hmm. That was a real bad apple that was coming into his house that night. Yeah. I mean, is that the incident you're talking about?
Yeah, that's the one. Yeah, I mean, it's another shooting situation. Isn't it? I mean, it's. If you look at it, here's a guy, with this big stretch in prison, a couple of, high-profile shooting incidents, and then fights for the world title. It's an amazing story, and you'd expect, or you might imagine, that this guy now, Ron Lyle, if you only looked at those facts, Candace, let's look at the facts, put away your knowledge. If I said to someone, here's a guy went to prison, there was a death, there was a murder or a killing, serves his time in prison, comes out of prison at, starts fighting at 30 years of age, fights his way to the title, loses to Ali, has an incredible fight with George Foreman. Then there's another death, and then the next thing you know, and if I asked people, so how does that guy end up? And they'd say to me, I don't know, dead from drugs, in prison, and I say, and you'd have to say no. He's doing more good than most politicians ever do in their entire lifetime. Is that a fair assessment, Candace?
Yeah. I don't think, if you wrote that as fiction, I don't think people would believe it.
You are
and
so
I'm not
right,
even sure it will make a good movie because it just doesn't sound plausible.
Can you imagine trying to pitch that, as I say, no one's going to believe, and here's the twist, now he works with people round the clock and does good. No one would believe that. No one's going to believe it, Candace. Get off my show. Stop telling fairy tales.
That's right. Yeah, I love your sense of humor.
Yeah, I do my best. So where is Ron now? I mean, obviously, geographically he's in Denver, but where's Ron now in his head and his heart and his soul and his mind? Where is he?
I don't think he's ever been better. He is so happy about this book and people reading about him and knowing his story and more people wanting to read it. The word of mouth thing. Yeah. I've never heard him so happy. He calls me almost every day.
Oh, good. Well, next time he calls, you make sure you thank him for the brief interview he did with us. The book is called Off the Ropes: The Ron Lyle Story, by Candace Toft, who's been my guest for the last 10 minutes or so, and it's published, and this is kind of the odd thing in the UK, by a company that generally does rugby league books, and that's an honourable sport. If you don't know much about rugby league, Candace, let me tell you, that's a sport that Ron Lyle would have excelled in and would have loved. Those are real people, good people, and it's a company called Scratching Shed Publishing. Of course, the easiest way to guarantee getting this book is simply to go onto Amazon. Off the Ropes, the Ron Lyle story. Candace, what's Ron going to be doing the next year or so? Is he planning on any trips maybe to Vegas for a fight, to maybe do a book signing or something?
Yeah, he probably will do a book signing in Vegas at some point. Caesar's Palace has asked him to do a book signing there. But in the meantime, he has a lot of kids doing really well in amateur boxing. I heard him on his interview with you. He kept talking about they're going to come along. We're going to have some good boxers here in the U.S. He's looking at his own kids and seeing that there is some real talent there. I have heard him say that the best heavyweights are European.
There
he
you are.
didn't say that, I don't think, to you. But
no,
he said it to me.
In parts of the old Soviet republics, they breed them tall, and more importantly, they breed them just like Ron Lyle and some of those guys he had those famous fights with. They breed them hungry. That's the way it works. they trust me. That's a conveyor belt of hungry big guys prepared to get in the ring. Candace, it's been an absolute pleasure talking to you.
It's been great, Stephen. We so appreciate the support that you've given both of us.
Oh yes, that was Candace Toft talking to me earlier. Her book, Off the Ropes: The Ron Lyle Story, is out now. Get it on Amazon. It's really worthwhile to